Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Being Unapologetically Authentic with me, your host, Jean Tian. Today, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about this little thing called anger. And the reason I want to focus on it today is there's been a lot of situations that I've observed and that I've personally experienced where anger has been the leading emotion within that experience. And as you can imagine, when anger is the leading emotion, it doesn't always lead to something productive. So let's take a step back and just put yourself or think back to a situation when you were at work. And for those of you who are managers, just think about a situation when you ask somebody on your team to do something and this individual doesn't do it up to your standards, up to your liking. And so you go back and you address it, and this person tries again, your team member tries again, and this team member just fails a second time. Or this team member didn't even, you looking at their work and they didn't even integrate any of the feedback that you had given them. Or if you told them to go straight, they made a right instead. The emotion that you may have been feeling at that time is anger. Why can't this team member do as I tell them? I made it so simple. I walked them through it. How is it that they couldn't have just done as I said? Or perhaps there was another incident where your team member gave you lip. Your team member gave you an attitude, spoke back, talked back. Your team member criticized something that you've done. And I know that as professionals, we'd like to think that, we wouldn't be bothered by it, that it wouldn't impact us. But deep down, if you're holding something in, but, outward, you're very professional and you say the right things, but deep down, you feel your stomach churning and you're like suppressing that emotion of anger so that it doesn't come out because you're going to get in trouble if it comes out. That's still anger. And what happens there is that as this anger builds, the anger starts to seep out of you in various forms, whether it's the way you speak to the other person, whether it's in your behavior, whether it's finding fault with the person going forward, even though it might be a subconscious thing that you're doing, you're still doing it. You're being very nitpicky because this person, how dare they speak back to me? How dare they not do what I asked them to do? And maybe you wouldn't say it that way, but it's likely what you're thinking. So this anger becomes pervasive in the work relationship that you have with this team member. Now go back to that situation where you've had something similar and think about the ways that you communicated with this individual. And think about the end result. Most likely, you either got rid of the team member or the team member left on his or her own. Now think about the situation where you, as the individual, as the manager, start to solicit other people. You start to build allies with other people about this team member or this colleague that just didn't do something right by you. They offended you somehow. And now you have magnified this energy, this anger even more, because now you've brought somebody else in, and now this other person is feeling it, and this other person is magnifying it, and this other person says, yeah, that team member is terrible. No, we're not going to keep them. We're going to make their lives miserable. And again, It's not something you would say consciously. But when there is a buildup, a collective of individuals that come together based off of an energy of hate or frustration or anger towards someone, what happens is that someone is already a lost cause in their book, that someone is already an outcast, that someone, no matter what quote unquote effort you put into it, that someone on your team is never going to be the high performer because either they are not able to, or you just refuse to see them as such. And you refuse to see them as such because your anger and your emotions are blinding your ability to see them as such, or your ability to work with them to bring them up to that speed. Now, imagine that this group now that is like team, I don't know, we'll use Steve as an example, Team Steve. Now, Team Steve, they just go back and forth and feed off of each other in terms of how this other person, this team member, let's call this other team Jenny. Team Jenny is all bad, doesn't do anything right. And then now Team Steve has his groupies, and they're all venting and frustrated about how Team Jenny always fails, and how Team Jenny doesn't do anything, and how this is wrong and that is wrong, and we're going to give Team Jenny a performance improvement plan because Team Jenny just can't do it. And all of the individuals on Team Steve is like, yeah, that's right, and yeah, and we're going to do it too. And so the reason I'm detailing this is because these are the situations that happen at work in a corporate setting. And whether or not you intend to create this, I'll call it mean group, it happens. And it happens because it started with one person who went out to seek other people that shared the same anger towards Team Jenny. And eventually what happens is that Team Jenny's work environment becomes a very toxic place because of the fact that there is a huge breakdown in communication. And that huge breakdown in communication was initiated, caused by this feeling of anger and frustration. Because whether or not you know it, or you realize it, or you're aware of it, is the fact that emotions like anger, because it's so strong, is so powerful. And it's so powerful in the sense that when it builds upon each other, it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people get sucked into it because people are looking to feel something. They're not, especially when those people are not happy with them, with something that's going on in their lives, they'll latch on to that anger. And eventually it builds into this massive exploding time bomb that's just waiting to happen. And the question of who gets hurt really is basically everyone. So the point of this episode is to highlight the fact that emotions like anger have no place within our hearts when we're looking to communicate with somebody for the best results, especially when it comes to work. And I know this because as a manager, when I first started out, I was so frustrated and I was so angry because the individuals in my team couldn't perform up to the standard that I was expecting them to. And it took me a really, really long time for me to realize that not everybody is going to have the same work ethic as me. They're not going to work in the same way as me, that they're not going to think about the same things as I do. And it takes a lot of self-discipline and compassion and awareness to start to move away from pounding on these things that make the other person a quote unquote poor employee or a bad person or a bad spouse, kid, whatever it is. And it is so important when we're looking at it from a communications perspective, because anger is the biggest filter that we can have when it comes to communications. Anger creates that conflict that everyone is so afraid of. Anger is the reason why we don't hear what is being said. We hear what we want to hear, or we don't hear at all because everybody's yelling at each other. Everybody's just talking because they expect their point to be taken, when they don't take the time to look at how they're communicating so that the point can be taken. Anger is, well, this is so simple. How is it that they don't understand? I mean, I've said this 10 times. I don't need to say it again. How dare they say this back to me? How dare they blah, 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 blah. That's anger. And then how many times have you said, oh my God, how dare they question me like this? I actually remember, now this actually triggers a memory that I had back like when I first started working after law school. I had sent out an email reminder to one of the lawyers in the legal office, right? I was at a bank. I was sending a reminder to the attorney that was assigned to my case, right? Or to my request or question. And it was because I was following up because I hadn't heard back in a while. And so I emailed back and I said, and listen, I didn't know the personality. So that's on me. But I emailed back and I was just like, dear so-and-so, I'm just following up on this. Can you advise? Blah, 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 blah. I had a feeling. I just didn't trust my feeling, but I had a feeling, but I sent it anyway. The next day, the lawyer called me into her office and just scolded me for how I embarrassed her. How dare I email like that? And how dare I make her look bad? And how dare I? But that wasn't my intention. I wasn't trying to make her look bad. I was trying to get my job done. And we can justify that all we want. But the problem is, my message, even though it was with good intentions, got misconstrued. Because I hadn't really taken the time to understand how it could be misconstrued and to minimize the risks of it being misconstrued. And on the other side of it, the lawyer, I mean, she was led by anger. So she felt it was appropriate to scold me in her office. And did she get her point across? Yeah. But what point was it? Did she convince me that I should just reach out to her instead? She could have just called and said, hey, listen, I understand, but in the future, do me a favor and just, reach out to me separately because, whatever, I know you're young and you probably don't know this and blah, blah, blah. So anger doesn't always really communicate well, does it? So then what do you do? In this situation, when you find yourself starting to feel that anger coming up from your belly, and then it's just like, and you starting to tense up and you're like, oh, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what is it that you're feeling? What's causing this feeling that you're experiencing at this time? Listen to the words that you're saying and ask yourself, what is it that these words are showing me? And look, I say this because I'm calm right now, but in the heat of the moment, it is tough. It is tough. And it takes discipline and it takes repetitive practice. And the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. And what you'll realize is that it's actually much, much better when you can walk away from the situation, to diffuse it, to figure out, how do I communicate in a way where this job gets done? And it's not the job gets done according to how you want it to get done, but the job gets done in a way that's best for everyone involved, including the organization that you're working at. And so often that's another thing. We forget that we're here not to fight for ourselves and to validate that our feelings and our beliefs are right, but we're here to work to be able to create a better organization, to make the organization better, to make it better for everybody that's involved. So it's about compromise when we're coming to a conflict. And oftentimes the anger clouds our judgment, and we're not able to do that because then we're in fight mode. Fight, fight, fight. And when you're fighting, you want to prove that you're right, and then you forget about what it was that you truly believed in the first place. And all you want to do is be heard and be proven and and then for them to say, yeah, that's right. But is that really the best thing for the organization? Or if you even think about it, is it really the best thing for your relationships? Do you always have to be right? Although sometimes I know I'm pretty much always right. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. So I think this one is important in the sense that we think about anger, because oftentimes when people aren't agreeing with you, the conflict starts coming in, that feeling of fight or flight starts coming in. And then if you don't address it immediately leads into, or eventually leads into, this feeling of anger. And then anger doesn't take us anywhere where we want to go. It just creates more problems at the end. And trust me, I know. I'm a very emotional person. And it's something I work through as well. It doesn't always happen for me. I am human, but I can tell you that by putting these practices into place, by becoming much more aware of what I'm feeling and what is causing what I'm feeling, it actually has helped me gain a greater perspective. It's been instrumental in me being able to be much more calm and rational, and really to look for a solution rather than to demand one. And so the next couple of episodes, what I'd actually like to do, I'll kind of sprinkle some guests into it too. And I think the next one will actually be helpful. The next guest that I have on is talking about masculine and feminine energy. And oftentimes when we look at and how it impacts your communication, and oftentimes when we look at the masculine and feminine energy, it very much, I think you'll tie it very closely to this feeling of anger as well. And one last note before we go too is that love is just as powerful, if not more, than anger. So if we're able to look for the solution that is best for everyone, that is a feeling of love. And when love is leading the conversations actually, the messages are heard, because people don't have their defenses up. They don't have the wall up because they're not in that fight or flight mode as they are in that anger mode. So what I was saying is, I will intersperse some of the guest interviews that I have, but for the next few episodes where I'm coming on, I would love to talk to you about my process for communications, productive conflict, to create productive conflict. And it's called pause. And so the first thing, though, before we even get there, is to really understand that energy, and the energy that we hold through the emotions that we have, is very much a key part in terms of our ability to communicate as well. Thank you so much for being here with me. Please stay tuned, subscribe, and like and share if you found this helpful. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.